What's going on, everybody? This is Fry. So today we are doing another tier list. This is going to be the Smarty class on the plant side. We're going to just go through the cards one at a time, and I will tell you where to put them on the tier list. Admiral Navy Bean is a powerful card. It does a lot of damage. You consider this basically an aggro card because it's trying to burst down your opponent. There's a lot of answers to Admiral Navy Bean, so playing this early in the game doesn't usually work out unless you're against Huge Giganticus or Super Brains, who can't deal 1 damage, can't remove the Admiral Navy Bean. It is very powerful to be running with beans. It's also an important part of Cycle Cap. Not even that important. You can actually do Cycle Cap without Admiral Navy Bean. That's, of course, the Admiral. That's the Astro Shroom in the Planet of the Grapes deck with Nightcap. Some of you might be surprised, but I'm going to put this in B tier. In terms of its power, it would definitely be an A because the Admiral Navy Bean deck, if operated correctly and you're also not in a matchup with that, is very good against beans. It's extremely powerful, but because beans do have a lot of weaknesses to small removal and field clear, and also just the main consideration I'm doing for this tier list once again is what percentage of your decks should this card be in. So S is going to be basically you can run it in any single deck. A would be in most. I don't think Admiral Navy Bean really fits into most decks. It's a very, very niche kind of deck, and there are better decks in the game than beans, and that's why I'm going to put it in B. Iceberg Lettuce is not a good card unless it's a freeze deck. Freeze decks we've really figured out how to do. I'm going to be covering that later. For now, I'm going to put a placeholder of this in C tier. You're basically never going to be running this in anything except for freeze, and freeze is just okay. So I'll put it in C tier. Next, you have the, sorry, I forgot to do it over here. Here's the Iceberg Glass, just freeze the zombie. So you could get value, but it's better just to run team-ups. If you're really concerned about your guy living and their guy not, you know, run Celery, run a team-up plant to stick in front of your guys instead of hoping Iceberg Lettuce will answer the problem. All right, next we got Lily Pad. I mean, maybe there really is a use for this. You know, Celery can get removed with 1 damage. Maybe Iceberg Lettuce really is a really good tempo card. I'm just thinking now, maybe I should try Iceberg Lettuce. Who knows? Encounter trial. Lily Pad's a card I've been trying for so long, making things amphibious. We did it, you know, we have a highlight in the highlight comp of playing this on turn 1 and putting a Triceratops on turn 2 in the water, which is a 2/4 against the Brainstorm, who instantly conceded. At the end of the day, you basically should never run Lily Pad in any deck, though. It's just a waste of a card. It just fills the deck slot. I know it costs 1 and gives you a card back, makes the guy in face. It's just not enough value, and there's really no place for this, and I'm going to say any deck. Lima Plurdon, on the other hand, you can run in literally any deck. It's not just in bean decks, but just having a 1-cost 2/2 amphibious is really good to answer those pesky, you know, amphibious cards like Toxic Waste Imp and stuff like that. The other thing that Lima Plurdon does is that if it's not answered and you're running any kind of card draw, this will actually take over the game with the Magic Beanstalks eventually. We definitely do that in Countertron. Plus, it's really good in bean decks, a really important part of any deck that's going to be featuring any kind of bean synergy. So we're going to put that in easy S tier. It's one of the best cards. It's one of the best cards in this entire class. Mars Flytrap's interesting. It's really hard to find a place for Mars Flytrap. It's a 1-cost 2/2. It's kind of like an aggro card. Think of this as like a sort of a weird bullseye. Is that it, you know, it's like a, you know, it'll charge the opponent's block meter less. The problem is this is worse than a 1/2/2 bullseye because if they have a full block meter, this ability doesn't do anything, as opposed to a bullseye would actually do some damage. Yeah, not an incredibly useful card, and I am gonna put it. It's just really. I'm going to put it in C tier, because honestly, running a couple of these in some sort of aggro deck, which isn't really the class to be doing aggro, but I have found some value. I've even experimented putting this in, like, for an extra 1-drop in decks like Countertron. It's just been okay. Primal Pea Shooter is a very high value, sort of high risk, high reward card. It can be extremely good against cards like Teleportation Zombie, Space Time. Can be even played very, you know, very effectively in the late game. If they spam any big zombie, you stick this in front of it, and you basically bounce their guy for 1. Obviously, this can only be useful if they play a big guy in an empty lane. If they play it in a lane where you already have something, they're trying to make a good trade. This is useless. It's not a bad card to be running in a lot of decks. It's either going to be an A or B. I think I'll put it in high B tier. Next, we got Celery. So Celery is an underrated card. If you're ever doing any kind of aggro, Like we do aggro Rose, run Shellery, because again, this is a team up, so you can stick this in front of anything, and it's adding essentially bullseye damage to that lane because the two teamed up guys in a single lane only charge the block meter once. Easy to remove. The team up is useful though. It'll add damage. You know, if you have a big guy facing a big zombie in a lane, you can stick this in front of it and you'll actually, you know, go from a losing trade to a winning trade since you're adding 2 damage. Again, there's not a whole lot of aggro decks, so I'm going to put it in the same place basically as Mars Flytrap, which is going to be C tier. Really shouldn't be looking to add this a lot, but it's an underrated card. Next, we got Snowdrop, which is a very good card in Freeze deck. So again, Freeze is not the end-all, be-all of the class, but we again have had very good success. If you want to see the recent Freeze decks we've done, specifically just in 2023, with really strong finishers like Dragon, actually did make Freeze decks pretty effective. I'll put it in, again, in terms of power, it's the same as Admiral Navy Bean. In terms of power, it would be an A tier, but since you're really not looking to run this on a lot of decks, I'm going to put it in B. Ice Age Baby. Spyrus is completely and utterly outclassed by Lima Pleurodon. The fact you're able to see the gravestones is limited in terms of the help. You know, I mean, this is only limited if you have an answer to that gravestone. It's very often, if you're an experienced player, you can more or less predict or narrow it down to 2 choices of what gravestones your opponents are playing anyway, because you know what classes and what are the commonly played cards. So because it's so utterly outclassed by Lima Pleurodon, I'm going to have to put it in D tier. There's almost no reason ever to run Spyrus, but, you know, every once in a while it's pretty good. Weenie Beanie, easy S tier, no explanation necessary. Bog of Enlightenment is an okay card, so this has a couple of uses. You can use this in amphibious decks, which are not very good. If you happen to have anyway amphibious cards like your Limas and like your Brainanas in a deck, so then this will buff them. You're mostly using this to control the other side. This will completely negate the attack of anything with 2 or less. If it has even 3 attacks, then it'll negate it. It'll bring it down to 1, which means they're just gonna have 1 damage, pinging your block meter. It also sets up Shrinking Violet pretty well, because then your guys are gonna have low attack and will be destroyed by Shrinking Violet. We'll cover that later. It's just okay. I'll put it in C tier. Next, we got Cosmic Bean. Cosmic Bean is not a good card. It does not do enough for its cost. It's a 2-cost 1/1 team up. It does conjure you something, but you don't know if that card's going to be useful. If you're running Admiral Navy Bean, you could run this because it is giving you multiple beans. We do run it in Cycle Cap, but you typically don't really want to be running Cosmic Bean. Even in Bean decks, you don't necessarily run it. I'll put it in C tier because it does see some play. Next is Grave Mistake, so it's just a way to answer gravestones. You know, the fact that it gives the gravestone back in your hand, you know, you bounce their pogo, so they'll just replay it the next turn. You know, it gives you a little bit of tempo value. I typically don't run Grave Mistake. I really prefer the, first of all, if they don't have gravestones at bricks, and second of all, it's kind of outclassed by Cool Bean. Like Cool Bean, you're not destroying their card, you're just slowing them down, and Cool Bean effectively slows them down too. Obviously, this doesn't really answer pogo, but I think Cool Bean overall is going to be the better option than Grave Mistake. It does draw you a card, who cares? Not a great card, every once in a while it's good. I'll put it in C. Next is Laser Cat Tail. I don't know, I keep on hearing people say they have such good, you know, success with Laser Cat Tail. I don't think this is a good card at all. First of all, it's a 2-cost 2/1. Absolutely terrible stats. You know, and it has a condition to turn into a 2-cost 3/2, which is pretty average. Even with the amphibious, is pretty average. The idea of keep on putting minions in front of this that are dying, and then, you know, they're just going to kill the Laser Cattail. They're not going to be fronting this and allowing you to grow it many times. I don't think Laser Cattail is worth it for its cost ever. I'm just going to put it in D tier. I don't think it's a good card at all. Next is Lightning Reed, which does just absolutely nothing. It's a 2-cost card that has poor stats. It only does 1. It does splash damage 1. Usually will never be impactful. It's typically the 1 damage splash is never worth it. We're going to put it in F tier. Next is Parapal. It's just a 2-cost 2/2. It has amphibious, it has team up, but it's just way too... If this was a 1-cost card, this would be very good. It would just be a good Shellery. And a good amphibious Shellery. This could be a really good card if it was at 1. At 2... I'm just putting in F tier. Rotobega. Rotobega is an interesting card, so you can buff this card. It ends up doing a lot of damage. One way to do that is with your bogs. The other way is with If you're Green Shadow, you can use Grow Shroom or Fertilize to grow this. This is a, it doesn't protect itself. It only attacks in the other 2 lanes. It's a pretty good answer to, for small removal, if you want to be able to take out a Swashbuckler on 2 or a Toxic Waste Imp. It's not incredibly good. Again, the fact that it does not protect its own lane, it makes it very easy, it'll do a little bit of damage, but the opponent then gains tempo by putting any card here, killing this for free, taking 4 damage, and then they have a guy on the field and you don't. That being said, it is a pretty decent aggro card. It's really not bad. I'm going to put it in B tier because there are actually a lot of uses for this, both in terms of aggro and control, and in terms of buffing this up. It's very nice with Green Shadow if you run, what's it called? Onion Ring, so then this turns into a 4/4, which does 8 damage, pretty good. Snow Pea, we do not run ever, even in freeze decks. This is not a good card. It's a 2-cost 2/2. Sometimes, again, very specific matchups, like against a Space-Time or a teleportation zombie, this can lock something into a freeze cycle, or if you combine this with a Snowdrop. At the end of the day, it's not a reliable way of getting a freeze. The fact you put this on the field, you're hoping it to give you your freeze and kill something with one of your freeze synergy cards, and then this just gets removed by a Bungee Plumber or Rolling Stone. It really should not run this in any deck. You can try putting Torch. Again, every once in a while you'll see it be good, but you'll put a Torchwood in front and it will just be constantly freezing a lane and doing 4 damage. But I'm putting it in D tier. There's basically no room for Snow Pea ever. So Magic Beans also, terrible cards. There's going to be a lot of low tier cards in the Smarty class here. This used to draw a card. I don't really know why they nerfed it. They were trying to nerf Cycle Cap that runs So Magic Beans. Now, it doesn't draw you a card. You waste 2 Sun, you waste an entire card, you waste a pivotal turn 2 in terms of tempo. If your opponent plays anything on turn 2 and you answer with So Magic Beans, you're just done for. Not a good card. We do meme decks where you're trying to really draw. I'm putting this in F tier, though. I really don't think there's really any room for So Magic Beans competitively. Cattail also, man. I mean, it's a 3-cost 3/2. It's just such bad stats for a 3-cost card. The Amphibious is not really redeeming. Just because there's budget decks that might run Cattail a little bit as an aggro card. Who's running budget aggro Rose, though, man? It's either high F or low D. Is it more useful than the cards in F? It really is. So we'll put it in D tier. Not in C. Putting it in D. Low D tier. Just because you could theoretically get away running it in some kind of budget aggro deck. Chili Pepper is not a great card. I don't even run this in a lot of freeze decks. It's kind of hit or miss. Sometimes the 2/1 can kill something. Plus it gets the freeze. So sometimes the fact that it has these 2 parts as 1 card, really it's undervalued. Seriously, freezing something costs 1, and then being a 2/1 doesn't even cost 1. That costs less than 1. So it's really, this card should cost 2. Definitely should cost 2, and Snoopy should cost 1. Yeah, man, is it even as good as these C tier cards? It's either like low C. I'm gonna put in a low C tier. Next, we got Cool Bean. This is a very good card. Most decks have gravestones, and if they don't, a 3-cost 3/3 plant is not terrible, because a plant 3/3 can just be shoved in front of any 2/3 that the zombies play. And that makes it useful. Again, if they have a gravestone, then you're basically getting free trades. They're not doing damage. You're killing them. They're not killing you. A very useful card to be putting in a lot of decks, not just freeze decks, but just any deck, just as your 3-cost card to have some answer to gravestones like pirates, which are incredibly powerful. The fact it's a bean is also a plus because it ends up being a trigger for Admiral Navy Bean and a card like Jelly Bean, for example. Cool Bean's a really good card. I'm putting in an A tier. Next, Go Nuts. Go Nuts, very difficult. You have to build your whole deck around Go Nuts with team-ups. Team-up plants are typically very weak. They don't survive. You need ways of adding health to these guys, and this only adds attack. If this had some sort of ability... What the heck? If this had some sort of ability to add health to your plants, that would be a whole different story. But just adding attack, we've had a little success here and there with Go Nuts, but it's really not a very good card. I'll put it in, should it even be in C? I can't put it in D. It's better than the D tiers. I'll put it in C tier. Next we got Mayflower. I used to love this card. I remember we even used to run like a card deck called Mayflourish or something, man, back in 2017 in the glory days of PvZ Heroes. Not a very good card, though. 3 cost 2/3 is very not good stats for a 3 cost card. Again, the amphibious, you're drawing cards, but you're also not drawing necessarily things that are good for your deck. Running this in a bean deck is useless. Just run a bean. You know, you're not going to be necessarily drawing good cards from this. There's a lot of terrible bean squashes and corns in this deck, in the game. Well, maybe not corns. We're going to put Mayflower. It does draw cards. Every once in a while, it can be good. It's not great. It's a C tier card. Planet of the Grapes. So this is, again, basically good just with Nightcap and just with Astro Shroom. I've tried running this in a lot of other decks that did not run Astro Shroom and tried to do it with Sporticus. Because Sporticus, you know, does direct damage to face and, you know, just Admiral Navy Bean and maybe Punisher. Haven't never really had a lot of success. I hope we can really find other uses for Planet of the Grapes other than Cycle Cap. It's a really important part of Cycle Cap, so I'll put it in B tier. It's kind of like on the same level as Snowdrop and same level as, like, yeah, let's say like Snowdrop and Admiral Navy Bean, that it's really good in one specific deck and then not very good anywhere else. Next card is Rescue Radish. Rescue Radish is a card, I don't even know if the last time I made this tier list I realized how good of a card this is. This is a very good card. Love this card. So this is what you do with Rescue Radish. First of all, if you have nothing on the board, you can just play it as a 3 cost 3/4, which kills the crazy class. I mean, if you need something, having 4 health is just so hard, so the very difficult card to remove. Makes very good trades against anything the zombies play on turns 1, 2, and 3. This can also, the bouncing another plant, you know, this is kind of like a liability in some cases, but very often it's a advantage. If you are to play this on the same turn, one of our favorite plays with Rose is to play Little Buddy. This is a Discord discovery. You play Little Buddy, heal for 2, then you play your Rescue Radish, and then you scoop this up. This costs 0 anyway. So you just get free heal, and if you have like a Pepper MD, then you're buffing your Pepper MD to the sky. So that's a really cool combo we like doing with mid-rows. Every once in a while you can get a good different rescue, like with Rotobega, you play that on turn 2. And then the you know, it gets into trouble, they put a, you know, gets its value, it gets into trouble, you can scoop it back up and replay it the next turn. Every once in a while rescuing other things is going to be good as well. You can grab a bean and replay it. This is so much better than Firefighter. This is a decent card. Ooh, where to put it? I don't think it can quite be an A. I'll put it in B. It's a very solid card and has some uses, especially in good old mid-rows. Next is Sporticus. Sporticus is just okay. This is like sad Black Eyed Pea. Since it's only doing, it's punishing your opponent from playing tricks by doing damage. This is really a block meter charger, and they're going to end up getting more superpowers as a result, which means Sporticus will punish them even more. Doesn't really see a whole lot of play. There's just not, again, it's a 3/3/3. It's okay. It's just okay. It's a mushroom. It's a nut. Jack of all trades. It's not a terrible card to put in a lot of decks, so I'll just put it in C tier just because it's just average. Next, we got Spring Bean. Spring Bean is one of the most underrated cards in the game. This is basically a fruitcake for the plant side that costs 3, but it's guaranteed to kill the guy. It bounces the guy off the field. Really good. This is not necessarily a control card because it gives your opponents more cards in their hand, but it is a tempo card. If you already have established, it's what we love to do in Countertron as the main deck that runs Spring Bean, is that if you have your tempo established with your 1s and your 2s, being able to just bounce anything they have off the board not only can answer more expensive cards than Spring Beans, but can just be opening up a lane. It's sort of like a cheap plant food in that sense, that if you have a lane that's clogged and you need to do damage in that lane, you can Spring Bean whatever it is out of here. The fact that it hits anything, no matter what its attack or health or cost or anything like that, makes it very versatile. You can run this in, again, tempo card. I'm going to put this in A tier because it's actually a really, really good answer, again, to just anything that the zombies play. Vanilla is so outclassed. Again, a 3 cost 3/3, but it's so outclassed by Sporticus, which is just it, but does more. The only thing this has is the fact it's a bean flower. Also, obviously, Cool Bean. Same class, same cost, same stats. There's really no reason ever to run Vanilla, so sorry, Vanilla. You're an F tier. Bean Counter is a card I've really tried to get value from. It's not a good card. It's a 4 cost 2/2. It's terrible stats. Even if you play this on turn 6. So imagine you have a 6 cost 4/4, and you make 2/1/1 little Weenie Beanies on the field. Weenie Beanies in F tier, by the way. It's not good value. I've tried ramping to this. I've tried justifying those little beans by, you know, having bean evolutions with like your jelly beans, and you have Admiral Navy Bean in that deck. It's not a good card. I wish it was. We can also probably the best deck for this was in if you're playing like an Onion Rings deck with Green Shadow. So you play this on turn 4, and then when you play your Onion Rings, you have 2 more little 1-drops in your hand. It's also not a good play because then you just lose turn 4. Like you have to actually control them in that deck on turn 4 rather than trying to play a 2/2 on turn 4. Ridiculous. It's not a good card. I'm putting it in D tier. Next is Cartillery. It's like an aggro card. It's a team up, and then it's a 5/2. It just has 2 little health. It does not win a trade against anything except for Teleportation Zombie. It's too easy to remove. It just doesn't have a place even in aggro decks. In the 4 slot, you're going to be wanting to run things with bonus attacks, things with strike through. This is just stats, and you're just throwing it on the field and hoping they don't have a Bungee Plumber or just anything that removes this. Not a great card. Deep. Next is Jelly Bean. Jelly Bean is an underrated card. This is if you need to have early game beans, but even if you have just like 3 beans, 4 copies of each in the early game, you have your Lima and your Cool Bean and maybe one other thing depending on what hero you have. This can actually get a ton of value because again, 4 costs, you're getting a 5/4. It can be in the amphibious lane if you're covering an amphibious beam, which is a really, really hard card to deal with in the amphibious lane. It is bouncing a zombie, so again, it's an answer to anything. It does have some limitations, obviously, the fact that it has to be played with beans, unlike Spring Bean, which can be run in any deck. Nonetheless, even though it's less versatile because of its power, this is tough. I honestly think this is probably more viable to run than Admiral Navy Bean. Because Admiral Navy Bean is just aggressive spam damage. This is like a really powerful tempo card. It's high B or low A. In terms of how much you run it, should I stay true to my how much do you run this? This can only really be run in a few decks. Okay, it's going to be the same as really Admiral and Snowdrop and really everything in B tier. In terms of its power, it's an A, but because of how hard it is to run, how often you should be looking to run this card, I'm going to be putting it in B tier. There are good beans, though. Like, there are beans you can run even in non-bean deck. See, this, I'll tell you the difference. Admiral Navy Bean you can only run in a all-out bean deck. This you can run in a deck that has Lima Pleurodon, which anyway run, Cool Bean, and then just Black IP. This isn't a terrible card to run in that deck. This is tough. This is tough. Low A or high B. It doesn't really matter where I put this, right? Okay, because of its versatility and its power, I'll put it in A. We'll put it together with Spring Bean. Next, we got Leaf Blower. It's a very difficult card to get value. You need there to be an environment. You also need there to be an empty environment on the field. The fact it's amphibious, I don't even know why it's amphibious. But yeah, and then you need there to be in that turn something to bounce. And then it's 4 cost 3/4, so it does not have good stats as opposed to, let's say, Jelly Bean, which is a 4 cost with all of its conditions, ends up being a 5/4. It's a very big difference. Really not much use for Leaf Blower in this game. Put it in D, a lot better options. Navy Bean is obviously only going to be good in a amphibious theme deck, which are not very good. We used to run them with Citron, but again, amphibious cards as a class are very understated. A Navy Bean as a 4 cost card that is a 4 cost 3/3 that gives, you know, maybe a 1/1 buff to maybe 2 cards on average. It doesn't justify running an entire amphibious deck. Because amphibious decks are, again, if amphibious cards were good, were better in general, and just had higher stats, then Navy Bean actually probably could see some play, but because amphibious decks are terrible in general, put that in D tier. Shrinking Violet is a very good card. This is not only the hard answer to swarm decks with low attack cards like Conman and Disco Dance Floor and, you know, Flame Face, a very useful card for removing Flame Face plus another card on turn 4. This also, again, even if they have stronger guys that have 3 or 4, this is going to be weakening them and making those cards a lot less effective. It hits 3 lanes. It's a huge, huge value card. We love running this, of course, in Countertron. I'm just going to put in A. It's a solid, honestly, you can run 2 of these in any Rose deck, any Citron deck. Even if you threw a couple of these into like a nightcap or something like that, I wouldn't be mad at you. I'll put it in A tier. Next, we got Snake Grass, which has terrible stats for a 4-cost card. Again, the chances of this living when you play it on turn 4 is so little. You know, you can play it together with a superpower maybe on turn 5. I should probably bring that back in a non-amphibious deck and see if you can just get the Snake Grass value. But for now, just because of how bad amphibious decks are, I mean, it's better than all the cards in D tier. I'll put it in low C, very low C. It's not as good as any of these, though. I'm putting it in low C tier. Every once in a while, this can take over a game if they can't answer it, so I'll put it in C. Next, we got Snapdragon. Snapdragon is a average card. It's a 4-cost 3/3, which is very bad stats for a 4. It can get a lot of value. This is only good if the opponent plays a big, dry minion on turn 4. And even then, what minions are they playing on turn 4? Think of the big, dry minions that zombies play. They all have 4 health, like Stompidon. Parasol Zombie is a 3/6. You got Bounty Hunter, which is one of the most common dry turn 4 plays. It has 4 health. So this actually doesn't really answer anything unless they're spamming several minions dry on turn 4. This is only a 3/3, so on turn 4 there's going to be a lot of ways of removing Snapdragon. Every once in a while, again, Snapdragon can get a ton of value, especially if you have ways of protecting this and, it's able to really deny plays from your opponent. You're really mostly just looking at the turn it's played, how much value it gets then, because, again, you can't rely on a 3/3 living. It's either low B or high C. I'm going to say this is high C tier. It's not as good as the cards that I have in B. Next is Winter Squash, a very important, it's the heart and soul, even more than Snowdrop. It's the heart of soul freeze decks. This turns any freeze from Snowdrop to Jolly Holly, which we'll see later, to Cool Bean. It combines with Gravestones and just devastates any Gravestone deck if you're running this with Cool Bean. Chili Pepper, and then of course your big chill superpowers if you're Rose or Green Shadow. This is the most important card in any freeze deck. It dies to Rolling Stone, which is its one weakness, but other than that, at 6 health, it actually is a very difficult card for most heroes to deal with. This is a very good card, and I love running it in freeze. It's only good in freeze decks, so I'm just gonna stick. I think the B tier class, with the exception of Rescue Radish, is all cards, and maybe Rotobig would be the exceptions. These are all cards that are powerful, but not useful in a ton of decks. So this would, again, in terms of its power, would definitely be an A, but in terms of how useful it is, how much should you be looking to run this in your deck, it's B. That's how I make the tier list. If I was going just based on power, there would be a lot of things different here. Lima Pleurodon probably wouldn't be even an S if I was just looking at power. Next, we got Witch Hazel. Witch Hazel is an absolutely terrible card. It is maybe a removal for 4 costs, but there's such better options for removal in this game. Everything from, in this class, any of the bounce cards like Spring Bean, just Shamrocket, just Squash is better than this. It's just too easily removed as a 0/3. If anything from teleporting minions in denies the removal to a Rolling Stone to, any Lightning Bolt 3 damage superpower kills it. I've tried Witch Hazel, man. It's either low D or high F for real. I'll put it in D because every once in a while an unanswered Witch Hazel can take over a game, but put it in D tier. Next, got Bird of Paradise. This is a very fun card. I found it to be effective, specifically with Rose when you're ramping to it. Playing this on turn 5, because of its low stats, it gets answered a lot, by like Rocket Science and stuff like that. At the end of the day, though, it's a solid card. It doesn't really give you, it takes some time for it to get going. 4 or 5, maybe it lives, okay. It gives you a superpower. I guess at that point, once it lives for a turn, it is worth it. It's also amphibious, making it harder to deal with. Usually there's better options on turn 5. Turn 5, you're really looking for cards that are just gonna take over the game and finish off your opponent. But Bird of Paradise is a decent option. It's a decent. I don't know where to put this here. It's kind of like an auxiliary card. The reason this isn't be higher is cards like thinking of really good 5-drops in this game, cards like Astrocado or Allosaurus, obviously those are in the Solar class. Those are cards that take over the game. You know, the Allosaurus with the amount of heals that it does, and Astrocado with the amount of damage it does with the strike through. Bird of Paradise, is this a take over the game card? Not really. It's a decent option, though. It's a very decent option. Hi, B. Hi, B. This is actually a really hard card to place. I think, honestly, it's because I don't actually know how good Bird of Paradise is. I need to try to use this more. Maybe just more mid-decks, and I'll just try to really force this in instead of my normal 5-drop choices. I mean, there's really nothing in this class in the 5 slot that really even competes with Bird of Paradise. So what would be a mid-deck? I really have to do more Bird, and you guys really enjoy when I do. But for now, as a placeholder, I'll put it in B tier. Could have been an A. Could have been in C. I don't really know. I'll put it in B. Next, we got Jolly Holly. Jolly Holly is a freeze card. You don't even necessarily run this in freeze decks. It's kind of really understated for a 5-cost card. Obviously, if you have a Winter Squash in the field and you get 2 freezes because it's freezing 2 lanes and you kill 2 minions, then obviously this is the best card in the game in those exact circumstances. But you're never going to run this in a non-freeze deck. Even in freeze decks, this is very expensive. And it's also circumstantial because there has to be an open lane next to the card you need to freeze. This is usually just hitting 1 card. Again, every once in a while it's incredible. I'm putting it in C tier. It's almost hard to put this in the same class as Snowdrop, because Snowdrop you always run, and this you don't run. This you never run. You know what? I'm putting Snowdrop up with our powerful circumstantial cards, and I'm going to keep this in C tier. Justice for Snowdrop. Plus, Snowdrop might be a better card than I give it credit for. I should try Snowdrop more. Next, we got Jumping Bean. Jumping Bean is a decent card. It's a 5-cost, it's a 5-cost Spring Bean that makes a 3/2 on the board. Is essentially what it does. It just bounces something. Is the 3/2 worth the 2 extra cost? Not really. So it's not as good of a card as Spring Bean. Spring Bean can be played on turns 3 and 4, making it more versatile. It can also be played in conjunction with other cards, easier than Jumping Bean. If you play Jumping Bean, this is basically all you're doing this turn. You're bouncing what they have and putting a 3/2 on the board. I wish this had a little better stats. It's a little understated. I feel like even at 3/3, this would be a lot more solid, because then kind of getting like a 2-cost 3/3, that would be the... It's 2 cards for 1, kind of. It's an okay card. I'll put it in C. It could have even been in B. Could have even been in B. Because how outclassed it is by Spring Bean, I'll put it in C, though. Melon Pulse is just a much worse Snapdragon. Snapdragon has 1 less health and also 1 less cost. So always run Snapdragon. Never run Melon Pulse unless you're doing some kind of meme deck. This is a D-tier card. It's not very good at all. Next, we got Starfruit. Starfruit is not a good card because it is a very expensive 2/2. It's so easy to remove. It was removed by everything from Rolling Stone. Nibble even makes it ineffective, but Bungee Plumber will remove it. Anything, on turn 5, very difficult to win games with this as a 5-cost card. Very little justification ever to run it. We do like running these as part of an Onion Ring deck, because then it's a 4/4 that does 20 damage, which is kind of cool. Again, still dies to Rocket Science, so it's going to be their top priority, or Fruitcake, or whatever removal they're running in their deck. Not super useful in a lot of decks. Every once in a while it shines. We also used this once a long time ago in a Citron deck together with Pumpkin Shell. Honestly, just to make a point, I'm putting this in D tier because this is I see this card actually run more than it should. This is not a good card to run in almost any deck, and even again in the Onion Rings deck, it's not great. It's better to have Admiral Navy Bean and 1-drops in that deck than it's 5/5. Guys, I'm putting it in D tier. Sue me. Smush Shroom is not a good card. It's literally a 5-cost 5/4. Back in the beta of this game in 2016, this was a 5-cost 5/6. And for some reason, they thought it needed a nerf because 5-cost 5/6 plant was too good. Because it answered Smashing Guard. I don't really know what they were thinking with this. Easy F tier. Next, we got 3-Peter. Oh, I wish 3-Peter was good. One of the coolest plants in the entire PvZ universe, to be honest. If you remember back in PvZ 1, that magical moment when they introduced the pea shooter with 3 freaking heads and it was shooting in 3 lanes. A classic. Unfortunately, most of the classic cards suck in PvZ Heroes. Every once in a while, for budget players playing this together with Pod Fighter or with Pod Father or with Torchwood, will buff this to 3 attack, or with Fertilize, and every once in a while I can see this. It's better than the cards in F tier, but don't run 3-peater, guys. Not a good card. Next, we have Brainana. Brainana, as you know, has been one of my favorite cards ever since it has ever been in the game. Even back when it was a 3-3, they buffed it. Brainana is basically it's one of the best cards in the game. It is, first of all, completely shuts down many decks. Any deck that relies on teleporting in big minions, or relies on tricks, or Bad Moon Rising, or Maniacal Laugh, or any expensive finishers, even the ones that use going viral and environments like Area 22 as finishers, Brainana shuts them down. It makes your opponent not able to reliably play their finishers in their deck. It's a very good anti-removal card too. If you have established your tempo on the board and you have these powerful threats, you know, and you have strike through minions, or you have a Triceratops that's gone unanswered, and they, you know, have their removal cards to remove it, this will activate those cards. So you can almost think of this as the plant food of the Brainy class, because again, you're adding 4 damage in the water lane, plus you're making your guys not get removed, making them get value and stay on the board and go face. This is going to be easy S tier. Really great card, Brainana. Heck yeah. Almost unfair, to be honest, in terms of how you can put Brainana in any deck, and in terms of how many decks this card single-handedly shuts down. Single-handedly shuts down. Ah, it's so good. It's so good. Next, we got Sap Fling. Sap Fling is not a good card. Very understated for a 6-cost card, and it makes Sappy Place, which is a -3 environment, very hard to find room for this in any deck. Again, your 6 cost is going to be your finishers, the one that take over the game. This does not take over the game. It's a 5-3, and it makes a, I don't know, just average-ish environment. It's in D tier. Next, we have Tricorn. So Tricorn, the main deck I actually used Tricorn in was Budget Midrose, which was one of the best budget decks we've ever done on the channel. Every once in a while, again, evolving this can do 4 damage in 3 lanes. I really should do Tricorn more. People have been asking me to do Tricorn. Someone in the YouTube comments has been asking me for months to do Pecanolith Tricorn, so maybe I'll try that. That'll make this do 6 damage in 3 lanes. It's gonna be tough to pull off. Maybe Tricorn in the same deck as Brainana, so if they play minions, this answers it, and if they go for tricks, the Brainana answers it. There's something there. This card has something to it. I still don't know what it is, so literally as a placeholder, I need to do more Tricorn decks. I'll put it in C tier. Next, we got Winter Melon, which again is not a very good card. It's very understated for a 6-cost card. 6-cost cards are supposed to take over the game. This doesn't necessarily do that. You need a very specific, you know, type of player who's playing big dry Gargantuars on turn 6, which who the heck even does that? For Winter Melon to be effective, it's kind of the opposite of Brainana. Really good against minions, really bad if they're going for any kind of tricks or anything like that. Also in freeze decks, it's usually not worth it in freeze decks. Every once in a while it's okay, but, and again, it can permanently freeze things. If they don't have an answer to this, this does take over the game, but after many turns, it doesn't really do enough damage. C, put in C. Next we got Dark Matter Dragon Fruit, one of the absolute best finishers in the game. 8 cost 6/6, so very strong stats. And then it also is amphibious, okay? Didn't even need that. Splash damage 6 makes it an automatic, amazing answer to any minions they play. And then in the same card, it also makes their tricks cost 6 more. So it's the end-all and be-all answer to everything. You know, if they're lucky on turn 8, they have a fruitcake that now costs 8, and they'll 1-for-1 trade with the Dark Matter Dragon Fruit, and then also feed you an extra card. That is like considered a good play, is the card that, you know, you're even trading in terms of cost, and then you're getting card advantage from it. One of the absolute best finishes, probably the best overall, just pure minion, powerful minion finisher in the entire game. Single, you know, and it's so versatile. Even Valkyrie is only good with Brainstorm and teleports and bonus attacks. This is a good finisher in any deck. So you can play control, you can even run a couple of these in a tempo deck. Usually turn 8 is a little bit too late for tempo and aggro, but sometimes having a little bit of finisher in case they answer all your cards is okay. And I am putting this up in S tier. Dark Matter Dragon Fruit. Really, really great card. The Great Zucchini, on the other hand, very difficult to ever run this. First of all, Dark Matter Dragon Fruit is just so much better. And if you're going to run Dragon Fruit and Great Zucchini, that's usually way too much late game. We usually just run this as a meme. This actually is not a very good card because at 9 cost, it can get answered. Dragon Fruit can't get answered because it makes their tricks cost more. It can get answered, and then what did it do? It destroyed all their It's very powerful. Maybe this is better than I give it credit, and the only problem, the reason we never run it is because it's so outclassed by Dragon Fruit, which comes a turn earlier. It's a really big deal. You mostly see this when you're leaping your 8-cost cards using Molecule. I'm going to put this... Again, in terms of power, it would actually be up here, but because of how outclassed it is by Dragon Fruit, I'm going to put it in C tier. Because again, I'm really just trying to stick to my guns here. It's in terms of how many decks should you really be running Great Zucchini. It will really be low C tier at that point.
Donating again.
Dragon tier is definitely S tier, and I'm sticking to it. Hope you guys enjoyed. That was the Smarty. I always call it Brainy Smarty, man. I couldn't make that more confusing. But yep, that was the Smarty tier list. If you have any major objections, like Sandwich does, let me know in the comment section below. Try to be courteous, guys. Be polite. Don't be an arrogant prick. You're just going to get banned. You know how that works. Luckily, we have a really nice community, and most people are good at debating in good faith. I will see you guys in the next video. That was the Smarty tier list. Peace. This is Fry.